Hello, welcome, and happy marvelous Monday, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we are discussing a very important topic: depression in rental housing. I am having this conversation or this discussion today because I recognize the importance of recognizing the signs of depression in both landlords as well as tenants. Today, I am going to share some practical tips on how to handle this type of situation for both parties, both landlords as well as tenants. Excuse me, if you are new to my channel, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be certain to subscribe to my YouTube channel. At YouTube, you can find me at Landlord Life with Karissa Spann. Life is spelled with a Y. I do want to make this one disclaimer, and that is I am not an attorney, and the information that I'm providing today is not legal advice. I do, however, share the industry's best tips and practices. So buckle your seats because it's going to get a little rocky for some, but I believe that educating the entire rental community is always a lot better. All right, so just wanted to put that in the atmosphere. And again, welcome. Thank you so much. I'm live on Facebook, I'm live on YouTube, and I am live on LinkedIn. So do me a favor. Let me know where you're tuning from. I love to know your geographical location, or if you want to share which platform you're tuned in on. Please, by all means, use the chat box. If you have comments or if you have questions, I will answer your questions while I'm live and online. This is what I do each and every Monday right here on this platform, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, welcome. So I am your host today, Karissa Spann, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert, and I'm so excited to have you join me today. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much. I hope to share something of value. If you find this information helpful, please be certain to like, tag, and or share it with someone else. Could it benefit someone else? Absolutely. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's for someone that you know who is a landlord, who is a tenant, or just perhaps someone who is dealing with depression. So this is not restricted to rental housing or the rental community. And I know that this is a much needed conversation. Sometimes a lot of people are not comfortable addressing this matter, which is why I thought it was so fitting to have these conversations. And I'm sharing a true story I unfortunately learned about recently, where a tenant who went through depression ended up losing her housing. She was actually evicted. She did not know what to do. She did not know where to go, who to turn to. And so my goal is to help as many people as possible prevent from going down that rabbit hole, because I understand that sometimes when people go through in life, they need help, they need advice, they need resources. And so my goal today is to provide information to make sure that it's clear, to make sure that it's relevant, and to make sure that is definitely understandable. So if I'm moving too fast, if you have questions, if you have comments, remarks, or observations, again, please use that chat box. All right. So I do want to acknowledge some people I see today. I know that some of my students are tuned in. Welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. So let me get right into the conversation today. You're looking forward to this conversation. Absolutely. This is a conversation that we definitely have to have, because it's not just isolated in any specific area, geographical location, right? This is something that a lot of people are dealing with. And unfortunately, some do not recognize these signs. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're in Florida, but you invest in Alabama. Thank you for that. I needed to know that. Thank you so much. All right, so let me get into the discussion on today. And again, if you find this information helpful, please like, please tag, please share it with someone on today. All right, so let me just put my disclaimer at the bottom of the screen here. I'm going to get right into the conversation on today. because it is definitely something that I believe that if more people were aware of, and knowing how to recognize these signs, then maybe they would handle things just a little bit different. All right. But here's the thing, and I know that Mental Health Awareness Month is in May. So this is not Mental Health Awareness Month, because for me, mental health awareness is every day. I don't wait to, have conversations in a specific month. I have conversations when I see the need. And so I hope to add value today, because people do need to recognize the signs of depression. So it could be landlords, it could be tenants, it could even be property managers. It could be people, professionals who are managing property on behalf of owners, right? Because life is life, and it's 2024. Things are happening now. Before I get into the conversation today, I was having a discussion with a close friend of mine a little earlier. He said, Karissa, you predicted last year that we were going to start to see a lot of evictions pop up, whereas tenants are now starting to take landlords to court. One of the things that I always emphasize is this philosophy that if, as a owner, as a landlord, as a property manager, if you treat your business like a business, it will pay you like a business. But if you treat it like a hobby, then by all means, it should pay you like a hobby. And what you don't know can and will hurt you. That's why I provide this information week after week. You can go to my YouTube channel and look at prior segments that I've conducted, different topics. And I'm here to answer your questions. It costs you nothing but your time to show up and get this live information, or perhaps to watch the replay. Now, if you hire me as a consultant, then of course you do have to pay for those services, but this is absolutely free. So I hope that something is helpful today. I'm going to get started because I want to first and foremost set the tone, set the foundation, and I'm going to share what depression is, because a lot of people don't recognize what depression is or what it looks like. So first and foremost, let me just say that depression is a mental health condition. It affects the body, it affects the mind, it affects people daily lives and how they function. And I know that sometimes if you're not aware of what the signs are, you can look at the behavior of someone and be like, oh, well, you know what? They're just having a bad day, or maybe they just don't care. Now, that may be true, but with depression, that's going to be a repeated process over and over and over again, because here's the thing. People, when they are suffering from depression, they feel hopeless. It's almost like having a big bucket of bricks that will not move off of their shoulders. It's like it's so heavy. They feel like there is no escaping. They feel like there is no way out. In many cases, some are embarrassed. Some are ashamed. Some don't even know that they're dealing with depression to talk through it. So the first thing that I will say before I get into the weeds of this conversation is that if you or someone you know feel like, believe, think that they are experiencing depression, reach out and get some help, okay? Because sometimes the worst thing that a person can do is go through that in isolation and alone, all right? There is help. As long as you wake up, there is still an opportunity to get help. So if you feel like you need help, reach out, let someone know that you need help. All right, so let me get into the conversation of today. I'm going to share information for landlords. I'm going to share tips for landlords. I'm also going to share tips and information for tenants. And again, if I'm moving a little fast, slow me down, drop your comment, your question, or your remark in the comment section. So I see you tuned in on YouTube. Thank you so much. I'm live on LinkedIn as well as Facebook. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so let me share some information for landlords first. Because when it comes to housing providers, and if you suspect or you think that you have a tenant who is facing depression, there's some things that you can do to potentially help your tenants. the first thing that I want to suggest for landlords to do, because at the end of the day, it's not just a rental property business. Sometimes, and I know that many people don't think about this, being a landlord or property manager is so much more than collecting money at the beginning of the month. Sometimes you do have to go above and beyond, maybe to offer resources, maybe to educate your tenants. And so that's my first tip for landlords: offer resources and support. Now, I am not saying that you have to be a caseworker. I am not saying that you have to be a doctor or a therapist. Absolutely not. That is so far from the truth. Many of us in the housing community, we are not skilled. We are not equipped to operate in that capacity. So I am not stating that. However, what I am saying is that when you see something, say something. Let your tenants know that you recognize that there's something going on. All right. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure that a lot of tenants would appreciate the resources. A lot of tenants would appreciate the help and the information that you share. And you know what? You may not have all of the answers, but maybe just do a little research. See what type of resources you can provide your tenants. Maybe there is some sort of mental health agency, or maybe if you have, for instance, I know that some landlords who tune in have tenants who are participating in some sort of housing program, or maybe Department of Human Services, Department of Housing and Community Development types of programs. And when you have tenants who are in any of those type of programs, I would always suggest to reach out, see if the worker could step in to provide some help for that tenant. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your tenant is in or does have the capacity to live on their own, to manage just the day-to-day functionalities of being a tenant. And that can be a lot for a lot of people, especially when they're dealing with depression, especially when they feel isolated and alone. So offer resources and support. Provide, like I said, provide information to the local, maybe a local mental health agency or a hotline, if you will. Encourage tenants to seek help if they are struggling. Now, if you go into a rental property, so let me just pause here. Let me put a dime in a meter. Let me just park here for a second. So in addition to being a housing professional, I'm also a housing inspector and a whole lot of other things as it pertains to rental housing. But let's say, for instance, you go into a rental property, and I've done this. I went into a tenant's place to do an inspection. True story. So I walked in the property to conduct an inspection, and I was so utterly surprised to see the condition of that 2-bedroom apartment. When I walked in, it was extremely dark. The walls were painted a dark gray, almost like black. One of the things that I always do is, if I go into a rental property, if it's dark in there, I'll always ask the tenant, is it okay if they can open up the blinds or the windows? If they could turn on the lights, right? Because I can't move in darkness. That's just first and foremost. And then whenever I'm conducting an inspection or just walking in, period, one of the first things that I always do, and I'll tell staff, I'll tell teams to do this, always look up in the corner, look up in the ceiling, because you don't want surprises. And so when I went into this rental property, to my surprise, there was, and I've shared this on a previous live, there was what looked to have been a spider web or something of the sort. It had been in the corner for so long. And I promise that I thought it was a dead bird. I don't know what it was, but it clearly had no life to it. I don't know how long it had been there. The tenant didn't see anything wrong with it, right? And I knew that in that moment, I had to get this tenant some help. Not just for mental health, but also potentially to clean the apartment, because it was just that bad. It was that nasty. And so when you have a tenant and they are struggling, seek help for them. That's my first tip for you. All right. As a landlord, Here is my second tip for landlords. Create a supportive environment for your tenant. What does that mean? So when you are creating uh, a supportive environment for your tenant, you want to make sure that you implement a policy or you have something in place. Let's say, for instance, the tenant has fallen behind on their rent. Maybe offer a flexible repayment agreement or flexible payment plans. You want to encourage social engagement. And so some of you may not be able to do this if you have maybe like a single family home, or you have a one-off home, a townhouse, or maybe you're renting a condo or an apartment, right? But for those of you who own and or you manage large multifamily like apartment buildings, this is something that you can definitely encourage your tenants to do. Participate in social engagement. Now, I know that we live in an age where a lot of people are just kind of hands off. They don't want to participate. They don't want to mix and mingle. They don't want to be around others. I get it, but still offer and create a supportive environment. If you have a social media page, maybe implement some sort of maybe a monthly drawing or monthly giveaway, or maybe you provide recipes or something on your social media channel and you send that out to your tenants. You want the tenant to feel valued. You want them to understand the importance of, like I said, that social engagement, that social environment. It really does make a difference more than you know. Listen, I have implemented social media campaigns, and tenants came back and said, Karissa, I really like that bingo, that virtual bingo that you did online, where I did a live. It was on Instagram. And I told all the tenants, listen, we're going to do a bingo. We're going to do a virtual bingo. I gave them the bingo boards in advance, told them what time I was going to be live. I was actually live. And for the people who showed up on the live, as I drew numbers, I just had them to put in a chat box or to comment that they got bingo, right? And so although I wasn't there physically to see that they actually won, I increase engagement because I want people to know and understand that as it pertains to renters, that they are more than just a tenant. They're more than just a renter. They're really somebody that we care about. And so we want to show care, which is why it is so important to create a supportive environment. I promise that sometimes just going just a little bit above and beyond can take things a lot further than you can ever think or imagine. So here's another tip I want to give for landlords, and stay tuned because I have tips for you for if you are a tenant. All right. Here is a third tip for landlords. Monitor the property. Monitor those tenant interactions. Again, if you see something, say something. If you go into a rental property, let's say you just do a drive-by, right? Maybe you have I know that many of you have quarterly inspections where you physically go inside of the apartments or inside the rental property, inside the house, right? But maybe do a monthly visual drive-by inspection where you just put your eyes on the property, especially if it's a house, right? You want to assess the condition of the property. Are the windows broken? Is there an excessive amount of trash on the grounds? If the tenant is responsible for cutting the grass, are they maintaining the grass? Are they sweeping the porch? Are they sweeping the steps? And if you recognize that those things are not happening, reach out to the tenant. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we were by there last week and we recognized that the grass wasn't cut. Is everything okay? You know, just have a soft and gentle conversation. One of the things that my father always told me growing up, he says, baby girl, you can catch more bees with honey than you can with vinegar. So sometimes you don't have to be mean, because we're talking about depression. And if somebody is depressed, and if they have a landlord that is overbearing, they have a landlord that is always laying the hammer hard with no compassion, with no care, doesn't really care how soft or hard the words come out, that will significantly impact that tenant, right? If they're already dealing with a heavy load, don't make it harder. So have those soft conversations. Again, if you see something, say something. Do a regular check of that property so that you'll know the condition of the property and address it. Don't allow weeks and months or years go by. No judgment here. I know that there are a lot of landlords who have not conducted inspections, have not laid eyes on the rental property, have not had anyone to assess the condition of the property. They don't know that the place looks like hell. They don't know that the ceiling has dark, moldy spots and stains because they just haven't gone there to know that there was a water leak that continued to get worse. Right? And so you want to definitely be proactive in addressing signs of neglect or distress. So when you see those things, address it. Because sometimes tenants may not understand how important it is to contact you to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, my faucet is leaking. Or Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, my kitchen faucet handle came off and I need a screwdriver or I need pliers to turn the water on and off. You'd be surprised how many tenants are living in conditions like that. They've never said anything to their owners, the property managers, or the landlord, right? And so monitor the property. When you recognize that there is a problem, take care of it. Now, especially if it is repeated behavior, you'll know that maybe there is something going on here. Maybe there's an undercurrent that I don't see, but is potentially there, which may be borderline depression. All right, so I wanted to give those tips for landlords. Now, I do have some tips for tenants because you already know I share information for landlords, but I'm sharing information for tenants as well. So if you are a tenant, okay, here's the one thing that I would recommend. Reach out for help. That's first and foremost. Please don't expect your landlord to be a therapist or to be a doctor and to know how to handle you. They may not have gone to school for that. They may not have a degree in that area. It may be hard for them to recognize the signs and understand that you're having a tough time or that you're dealing with challenges in life and maybe they are overwhelming. Go ahead, reach out, get some help, seek advice, seek help. Maybe contact, if you have a social worker, if you have a case manager, let them know. Maybe you don't have either of the above, right? Maybe look for some resources that are in your rental community to see what might be available, either free or low cost to you. Just depending on that jurisdiction, it may be free, but you don't know until you ask. In many cases, you have not because you ask not, right? And so a good book that I read, it said that if you ask, if you seek, if you knock, usually you can find those answers. You can find what you're looking for. And the easiest of the three is to ask. So I wanted to just give that first tip for tenants. Now, here's another tip for tenants. Communicate with your landlord. Communication with landlords is so important because you always want to be open about any difficulties, any challenges that you're facing. Now, here's the thing. Some landlords may be able to offer reasonable accommodations if it's needed, but you don't know until you have that conversation. Let the landlord what you stand in need of, right? And so with reasonable accommodations, I offer suggestions for landlords such as maybe flexible payment terms. But now here's the thing. All landlords may not be able to do that. They may not be able to extend that that late fee date. So for instance, if a late fee is assessed on the 6th or the 10th of the month, some landlords can perhaps extend that out a little bit longer, while others may not. But you don't know unless you ask that question. Have that open conversation with your landlord, communicate. All right. Here's another tip for tenants. Please know and understand that it is so important to maintain your living space. Now, here's why that's important. Couple of reasons. The first is that, yes, it's something that the landlord expects for you to do, but ultimately, I promise that when you come into a clean living environment, it always feels a lot better than coming home to something, or you walk into a room and it's dirty, or you walk into the kitchen and there are dishes piled high. The stove has never been cleaned. There are grease stains, there are grease splatters all over the stove, all over the refrigerator, all over the ceiling, all over the floor. There's a stench. Now, usually when there are housekeeping issues, you might see a lot of nets, you might see a lot of flies, you might have roaches, you might have mice, rodents, things of that sort. If you maintain a clean home, or at least try to clean as much as possible, usually that will reduce or minimize the chance of you having those issues that I just named. Now, sometimes, granted, it could come from a neighbor. It could come from someone next door, right? Usually when there's a lot of construction going on, rodents, they're looking for a new home, right? I get it. I understand. But I promise that if you maintain a clean home, it looks better, it feels better, it smells better. Maintaining and making those small changes to your environment, it could boost your mood. And so that's the next point that I wanted to share about maintaining your living space. It feels good. It makes you feel good to be in a clean living space, because sometimes a lot of clutter can add to the depression. Clutter can add to an unstable mindset. It can add to it, right? And so just those little small steps will make a huge impact. And you'll be surprised at how it can change your entire mood. It can change your entire perspective just by walking into the bedroom and walking into a room, whether you have a bedroom or an efficiency, walking into a space where the bed is made, where you get ready to take a shower, where you wash up, and the sink, the basin, the tub, the shower area is clean, right? Sometimes it can be stressful. You walk into that space, it's dirty, it's dark, there are rings around the tub, there are dark looking moldy type of stains. Could be mold. Sometimes it could just be dirt because it hasn't been cleaned in a while. So taking those small steps can make a huge difference. And I want you to know and understand that as a tenant, that you do have an opportunity to change your rental space. You can change the trajectory of what you're dealing with. Like I said, if you say something, communicate to your landlord, be a little bit tidier, right? And then if you have kids, I promise that they are looking at that behavior. Children will pick up quickly and they will duplicate, they will mimic, even at a very young age, what they see, right? And it does make an impact. They'll grow up. And although you may not think that something is wrong, they'll grow up believing that the wrong lifestyle that they've seen down through the years, they may think that it's right. And just because you're doing it doesn't mean that it's right. I mean, right is right and wrong is wrong. But I always put a great emphasis on making sure that children, especially young children, they grow up in a healthy home, healthy mind, healthy environment, because they are our future and they deserve better. And so as a parent, as a guardian, if you have children in your home, if you know you're dealing with depression, the children deserve better. Seek help so that behavior is not repeated. Don't allow it to be a cycle, because if you go from one generation to the next with it being uncorrected, not treated, then that behavior is going to continue on. It's not going to change. All right, so let me pause here. I do want to say that as it pertains to rental property, there are a lot of things happening. There are a lot of things going on. And I know that from a housing provider standpoint, it can be heartbreaking for those of us who are in the industry. Now, I've been in the industry for over 2 decades, and it can be heartbreaking when we see things, when you go into a rental home and things are broken and tenants haven't communicated, they haven't paid their rent, they're not paying the bills. That can be heartbreaking. And so that's why I share this information today, because a young lady who was suffering from depression, she went into a hospital to get treated. Now, she had some other issues that were going on, but I won't get too deep into that. And her landlord illegally evicted her. Unfortunately for that landlord, this young lady had someone who tuned into my weekly podcast that I do, and they reached out to me for some help for this young lady. This young lady does have a lawsuit, a hefty lawsuit against the landlord who illegally evicted her. Listen, there's a right and a wrong way to handle your rental property business. I always emphasize the importance of knowing what the laws are in your rental jurisdiction. Doesn't matter if you're a landlord or a tenant. Now, if you are a landlord and you're self-managing your property, you are still required to know what the laws are. Tenants, please know and understand that you do have rights, and it is not okay for someone to take advantage of you. If you have a medical condition, if you have some sort of mental health condition, you do have rights. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hey, Wayne. So I wanted to share that today because I recognize that a lot of people are dealing with challenging times, and we're going to see some really uncomfortable situations come to the surface. Please buckle up, but also please stay tuned. You can find me here every week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm right here on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and I am on YouTube. And again, if you have not subscribed to that YouTube channel, please go over to YouTube. Find me there, Landlord Life with Karissa Spann. And again, life is spelled with a Y. If you have questions, comments, remarks, or observations, I do respond to comments on that YouTube channel. I hope that I shared something today that was helpful or of value today. Let me do a quick recap of tips that I shared for landlords, as well as tips that I shared for tenants. So the tips that I shared for landlords were very simple. That is, offer resources and support for your tenants where possible, because it is so important to do that. You want to do that because, again, it's more than just collecting money at the beginning of the month. Provide information. If you are aware of information about local mental health services or hotlines, you definitely want to do that. The second tip that I shared for landlords was to create a supportive environment. Try to implement policies that support mental health, such as flexible payment options. I also encourage landlords to promote community activities and social engagement, and then also to monitor the property as well as those tenant interactions. If you see that there are signs of neglect or distress at the rental property, say something to the tenant. But you can only do that as a landlord if you're doing those regular checks of that rental property. Now, I did provide tips for tenants. Here are your tips. As a tenant, you do have rights, but first and foremost, know and understand that it is so important to reach out for help. If you think or if you know that you are experiencing depression, contact a mental health professional for support. Your landlord may not have the resources. They may not know how to handle your situation. Capitalize and utilize those community resources as well as any hotline. I also shared the importance of communicating with your landlord. Be open about your difficulties, the challenges that you are facing. You never know how that will make a difference. And then I also shared the importance of maintaining your rental home. It always feels good when it's clean. It looks better. It smells better when it's clean. And so those are the tips that I have for you on today. Hello, Bishop Tucker. Hello, Bishop Charity. Hello, Lynette. Thank you, Boss Lady, for tuning in from North Carolina. Kim, I see you down in South Carolina. Thank you so much for sharing. I do appreciate that. Listen, guys, ladies and gentlemen, rather, my time is up, and I absolutely thank you for yours. This is where you can find me each and every Monday, right here at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let me share my email address because I want to make sure that if you do have questions when I'm not online, that I can respond to you, because I recognize that sometimes people don't want to drop their personal concerns or issues publicly on that platform. So here is my email address at the bottom of the screen there. info@landlordlife.com. That's where you can email me. I will respond. And again, make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel so that you'll be the first to know when I'm live and online. Thank you so much, guys. I see you all next week. I'm going to say bye for now.